Hello, everyone. This is Mike Koss, founder of KevAdvoTech, and welcome to another podcast edition. I'm delighted today to have a return guest, Dennis Farrar, who I met a bit over a year ago, I would say, and I got to know Dennis a bit. We did a podcast together a year ago, and he talked about how special needs planning works, basically. Dennis is a large contributor to a Facebook group. He'll share some more on that. It's one he created, a group he created, which is exactly that, how special needs planning works. On that podcast, we talked a bit about some of the dynamics and things that you should be thinking about for your special needs child as they're growing and we're aging and planning for their estate and financial needs as the future progresses. So I encourage you all to take a look back at that podcast as well. But today's topic is going to be one that I'm extremely passionate about. Think about it every day. And it is about the crisis. It is a crisis regarding long-term housing for our special needs loved ones, right? Where are they going to go when we, mom and dad, can no longer physically take care of them, or we die? We're no longer here and can take care of them. So I think about that every day. Typically, it's unfortunately, sometimes I think about it the minute I wake up, and it's the last thing I think about before I go to bed at night. So it's extremely important to us. Like I said, we're not getting any younger here. So we see a lot of things out on Facebook and some of the other social media outlets about this topic. And I think everyone struggles with some of the challenges. There just isn't enough availability. People don't know how to get access to housing. And frankly, in many cases, the housing is just not desirable, right? We just simply don't want our child to live there. So Dennis and I are going to get into this conversation. We have a lot of common ground here. I want to encourage all of you, stick around at the very end of our conversation on special needs long-term housing. I've learned recently, Dennis has thought a lot about the challenges and the dynamics of special need mothers in particular that are single. They're divorced. A lot of divorced mothers out there, mothers of special needs children and adult children. And it's extremely challenging enough as a family unit, a mother and a father, to raise their child. It's even 10 times more difficult, I think, if you're a single mom. Dennis has thought long and hard about that. I think he might be writing a book or sharing some information down the line. And we're going to save that for the tail end of this, though. So please stick around. With that said, Dennis, welcome again to KevAdvoTech. And if you don't mind, please share a little bit about your family, what you do for a living, and we'll kick this housing topic off afterwards.
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. It's good to be back. And yeah, so my name is Dennis Farrar, and I have a family. I have my wife. I have two children. My oldest is Tim, and Tim has autism. He was diagnosed with autism at about age 2.5. And since that point, I asked the doctors for books and resources on how to do this special needs dad thing the right way. And the doctors basically just told me that every circumstance is unique, and you live it and you learn it as you go. So I did what they said. I lived it, and I dove in headfirst. And I went to every doctor's appointment. I went to every IEP meeting. I went to all of the lawyers' appointments. I went to everything, and I just basically soaked everything up that I could. And at one point, I decided that, you know what, I can be a resource for families. That thing that I strived for when my son was 2, I can be that resource for people. So after a while, I created my Facebook group, How Special Needs Planning Works, and I started off with that, with providing a whole bunch of content, and now I'm still providing a lot of content, but I'm letting some other families come in and put their unique situations in, and then letting some of the community help them out and seeing how that goes for a while. And it's working pretty well. I still plan on adding a whole bunch of content, providing all those things that I've learned for families. So that's fantastic. What I do, Mike, is that I am a financial educator. So I am a part of a planning team. The planning team is going to include your medical and your therapy type of people, your caregivers. It's also going to include your legal team. And then you need a financial team to make sure that you have all the assets that you need and all the different things that are going to help you make sure that your loved one makes it past our time and through their lifetime. So I help families put together special needs plans. So thanks a lot again, Mike.
No, Dennis, that's awesome. Welcome again. So let's shift gears and jump into the main topic here, housing. You had reached out to me recently again. You were running into some folks, I think, on social media that were asking about some housing questions. What might be available, et cetera. What's the ideal housing plan look like? And you had remembered that when you and I talked a year ago, that I've been part of a nonprofit here in the Villages, Florida, part of the board. It's called My Special Place. What I've been involved in the last 4.5 to 5 years since we've been here part-time in the Villages is working with my colleagues on the board and in really trying to work with the developer here that owns and started the Villages. The Villages, for anyone that is not aware of, we're a community now of probably close to 150,000 people. It's a huge development. 60 to 70,000 single family homes, self-standing homes within the community, probably 90 to 100 square miles by now, I imagine. They just recently bought a whole bunch of land that's literally going to double in size, and which means we're going to have probably well over 200,000 residents here in the next 10 to 15 years. Along with that, we meet more and more special needs families. Those of you that know my family, my wife Ruth and I have a son, Kevin, who's 37 years old. He suffered a traumatic brain injury at the age of 15, and he lives with us. He needs 7x24 care. Thankfully, he's very physically fit. We golf, we walk, we go to the gym, and he gets to enjoy all that, but he needs total guidance, right? His cognitive abilities are pretty impaired, and speech, he's mostly nonverbal. But as we've been here in the Villages now 5 years, we continue to meet more and more families. In fact, have been involved in some of the clubs that we've built here for our families, social clubs. And it's a beautiful thing. So if anyone is familiar with my website at KevAdvoTech.com, I share a lot of stories out there on some of these activities that the parents and volunteers have built. It's just incredible. And we think there are at least 150 special needs families, families with adult special needs children that we know of here in the Villages, and there's probably 300 to 500 or beyond, and it's only going to increase as they continue to build here. So housing is a huge gap, housing for our special needs. So I've been very active with my colleagues in trying to persuade the developer to work with us, not a freebie. We haven't been looking for a handout or a freebie, but with all this vacant land here that they're going to build houses, wouldn't it be nice or ideal to build perhaps a little conclave of small homes kind of clustered together in a campus-like setting, right? We've already got the social infrastructure here that people are moving here for. Something like that would be nice. At one time, 3 years ago, Dennis, we had our hopes high when the Villages assigned us a third-party consultant that they work with on a number of projects. This consultant has experience in building senior independent living, assisted living, and nursing homes here in Florida. They've got, I think, at least 16 facilities. And, it's kind of interesting because that's housing, they've got all the experience in doing that. All you got to do is apply that to special needs, right? And add and take a look at some of those dynamics. But anyway, we worked with them for quite a while, and we're quite excited about the possibilities. They talked originally about maybe building a 2 or 3 story facility with 100 rooms and for all levels of care, right? Well, unfortunately, COVID hit, and a lot of things got put on the back burner during the pandemic. And as things started to improve after that, and a lot of activity restarted, we just got pushed further and further, I think, to the end of the line. Well, just recently, my special place board received a letter from the Villages. They're not interested. They're not going to sit down and work with us, brainstorm or anything on this housing, and it's disappointing. We're incredibly disappointed, and now we're kind of back to the drawing board. So that's a long-winded. I hijacked this conversation a little bit to provide that kind of update, but I think it fits here in our general topic, right, about the housing crisis. It's nothing unique to the Villages or Central Florida or Florida for that matter. You and I run into families all over the country every day on our, I get contacted all the time by people that are excited to see that we in the Villages have built this social activity network that our kids are, living their best lives, right? They really are. But it's funny because I'll get on the phone with a family, at least once a week, and they're all excited about this. But then the topic always seems to turn to housing, because I think they just assume, oh, and there's going to be a place for Joey to live, right, when I can no longer care for him. No, sorry, here's what we're trying to figure out. And no, unfortunately, we're not there, and we got a lot to figure out yet. So I guess, Dennis, if you don't mind, I'd like to get your view of what are you seeing around the country, people that or have run into on housing. How much of a crisis is this in your view? And then we can talk later on some of the things we need to do probably to push this agenda forward.
Yeah, sure. First of all, what I find, first, families are very concerned about this particular topic. Everybody understands that we're not getting any younger, and that our time with our loved ones is limited, right? No matter what, no matter how good we take care of our bodies, one day our loved ones are probably going to be doing this without us,
Yeah.
right? So it's a one of the number one issues that I work with families on is, where will my loved one go once I'm gone? There are some people, and I'm not an attorney, so I can't tell you how to do it. I can advise you on which attorneys to go to, but I would say that if this is something that you want to do, reach out to your attorney. But there are families that want to leave the home that is the family home today in a special needs trust, so that your loved one can remain in the home that they've lived in for a long time. And that's a possibility. I tell them some of the financial challenges of that. Like, for instance, if there's a mortgage remaining, that mortgage still needs to get paid. If there are taxes that, obviously taxes will need to get paid. Maintenance still needs to get done. All these things that you do as a homeowner today, those will still need to be taken care of if the home is left in a special needs trust. So I think a lot of families think, hey, I've got this asset, this wonderful asset. It can be left to my special needs loved one, and it can. Right? There are definitely ways to do that. I just work with families to make that transition a little bit more understood and known. So I think that's a big thing that families want to know is, how do I understand it and how do I know what to do? And I can help families kind of understand some of that stuff. But then there are also families that understand that I'm not going to have this asset that my child will live in. My child needs more care than what I could expect to have someone come in and provide 5-day a week or 14-hour a day care. There's just no way that that's going to happen. So then we start to investigate the types of future housing that are going to be required for your loved one, and then making sure that there is resource to make that happen. All right. So again, there's a whole bunch to it. I work with all kinds of different family dynamics. I work with single parent families. I work with two-parent families. I work with grandparents. I work with a variety of family dynamics, making sure that they understand what options they have available to them, and where to go for additional resources.
It's interesting, Dennis, everything you just shared here about, we can absolutely legally leave our home to our adult child when we pass on, right? Part of a special needs trust, and use that, have him or her continue to live in there. That's something I've thought long and hard about over the past year. I've done some homework here in Central Florida with Sumter County, and that's all very possible. There are some rules and regulations, so to speak, that you got to keep an eye on and adhere to, but it is all possible. I would certainly have to clear that, though, with the villages themselves, I think, because they're probably going to introduce some gotcha in their HOAs, although I've looked closely at the HOA here, and I think it's possible to do that. My biggest concern, though, is I'm not sure for us, our family, if it's the right thing, because you hit on the key point, which is, depending on the level of care you need, being in a home by yourself, whether ideally, even I'd love to have a roommate, perhaps, for Kevin, right? An ideal roommate, but there's dynamics with that too. And you've already talked about bill paying. You're a homeowner, so somebody needs to be on point as the trustee of that special needs trust, making those financial decisions and regular payments. I know you and I have talked about this before. There are third party that do this as well will be that trustee to make sure that the bills are paid and that. But I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure if that's the right scenario or environment for Kevin. I'm a little bit torn. I think maybe a larger, not necessarily a group home, but a facility of sorts where they've got a lot of things going on and he can be guided down to breakfast, lunch, and dinner and things like that. It's certainly very possible for those that are quite independent, right? We've got a number of families here that their special needs adult children, amazing, beautiful kids. I still call them all kids, but they're quite independent. So I could see that scenario playing out. And on top of that, I've thought long and hard and continue to, and I'll probably share some things down the pike in future podcasts to pull all that off. Technology can absolutely play a role, right? I mean, there are so many things now available to enable your home, right? Make it a smart home. So I'm thinking long and hard about that too. If I ever did that route for Kevin, what level of surveillance and assistance and all that could I lean on technology for? And the good news is that's all going to continue to improve, right? More and more things are going to be available. So yeah, this is an interesting topic. I'm not sure that I've come across anyone who's completely figured this out. I love the fact, thank you, you're definitely in the thick of some of these kind of conversations and helping folks. I think that's amazing and much needed. I think over time, what I'd personally love to see from a collection of people with experiences, either the families themselves or someone that, financial planner or someone like yourself that knows how to bring some of these things together. I'd love to see a playbook out there, Dennis. I realize that's utopia, right? But a playbook of sorts that gives a family a bit of a roadmap. And I know there's pieces of things out there, right? Yeah. But I think that's what's severely needed. So you and I hopefully can be a contributor to that as well.
Yeah, I've thought about putting that checklist together, but when the checklist reaches about 35 pages, it becomes a little bit daunting for a lot of families because you may have a family that 20 of those checklist items, I fall into, I can answer those, but then the other 500, I can't. My circumstances don't involve that. So I got the idea pretty quickly that if I'm going to do a checklist, it's basically going to be a brief checklist that then guides you to the proper resource that is going to help you with your the next choices. Right. So that's probably where I will start to focus on checklists. But yes, you're absolutely right. There's advancements happening all the time. I believe that the answers that we will have 10 years from now will be different than the answers we have today. Sure. And I think that's because of necessity. Right. They say that necessity is the mother of invention. Well, when 32 individuals are being diagnosed for every one, out of every 100 children born, 32 are diagnosed with autism in 2023. Yeah. Okay, so if we look at that, just autism alone, that doesn't include traumatic brain injury. That doesn't include CP. That doesn't include Down. Doesn't include all those other reasons why you might have housing in the future as an important topic. We're going to have the necessity to tackle and solve this problem. And I'm a firm believer that it's not only going to take the public sector resolving some of these issues, but it's also going to take the private sector to get involved as well. So, yeah, I'm 100% on board with you that these challenges are big for every family that is going through what we're going through, and those that have the option to consider housing where your loved one will stay independently or semi-independently. Those are going to be challenges that you have to significantly consider.
Yep.
And the solutions are going to have to match what your needs are.
Well, and that's the key too, right? I mean, as we're talking at the front end of this, the special needs spectrum, as you just said a minute ago as well, is so wide, right? The needs are so wide, so the solutions aren't a one size fits all, right? Everyone has varying levels of needs and independence or the need for full-fledged nursing type facilities, right? And you've got major mobility issues and all that. So all that whole spectrum needs to be addressed. I think the other challenge too is, or at least what I see, is a lot of the services and access to services certainly varies by state, right?
Yes.
Florida, unfortunately, I've learned in my time in Florida, and we've been in Florida actually almost 20 years now, just part-time, but the last 5 here in the Villages, I've known early on that state of Florida ranks at the absolute bottom when it comes to services, access to services, the wait list, the waiver list. So I think those things need to be taken into consideration. Some of the calls I get from families that find my website get all excited about, wow, this is great. I live in New York or Virginia or wherever. I've talked to people as far away as Hawaii, believe it or not, that said, wow, it sounds like the Villages has a lot to offer my child. And I say, absolutely. Here's what we built, the moms and dads and families have built and the volunteers. But then when I get them talking about, well, what do you have today, right, for services in your state? And some of the services in other states are quite impressive, right? Well, there's, of course, I'm not going to get into a political discussion here, of course, but I mean, it all varies by states on tax base and things like that. We don't happen to have a state income tax here in the state of Florida, so I'm sure, things like this need our chopping blocks in the budget, right? But I think if they thought, the state of Florida, for example, I think if they thought long and hard about it, there's other ways to move money around in the budget and focus it on something important like this. So yeah, I caution everyone I talk to. Yeah, we've got a lot to offer here, but before you pull up stakes, just understand the housing is a challenge, and in the wait list and services, et cetera, are tough. The other thing I see, Dennis, and you and I may have talked offline about this recently. The other thing, and this to me is incredibly heartbreaking. I've now spoken to at least 3 families. 3 of them happen to be, no, 2 out of the 3, I'm sorry, happen to be single mothers that have been raising their adult child. When we get into this conversation about the future and trying to proactively plan to find housing, they've told me, and these are women in other states, what they've told me is, you know what my strategy is? I've tried for so many years, the mom, have tried so many years to be proactive on this planning so that I know where Joey, my Joey's future is going to be. and I'm getting nowhere, right? I can't, I've gone to some facilities to check them out and done tours. And of course, COVID changed a lot of that too, right? I mean, I was frustrated, Dennis, because I was trying to visit a few places in Florida, in the state of Florida, housing places for Kevin, for the future, of course. And of course, we couldn't visit anything because of the shutdowns and all that. But some of the facilities I've seen are just, as I mentioned earlier, we wouldn't put our son in there. I mean, that's the unfortunate part, is sometimes they may be a nice facility, but they're in not so desirable locations, so to speak. And so you got a safety concern and all of that. But back to these moms, what they've concluded, what they shared with me that broke my heart was, they said, we have been advised multiple times to just forget the planning. You're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get these services. You could spend hours and weeks and years planning ahead for that and trying to get access, trying to line up a home in the future. You're not going to get anywhere. Just wait until you're in a crisis situation. If you have a heart attack and die on the floor in front of your kid, then rest assured the state's going to come in and they're going to put your son or daughter in a facility, and he or she will be fine. And I was just shocked. I was taken aback and almost in tears on one of the calls, listening to this very distraught mother. And it was just a reminder to me, Dennis, of why I care so much about this topic. I think myself, I think like 100% of the other parents out there, like us, special needs parents, we want to get all of this lined up. I want to see the day when Kevin can move in someplace and do all the proper transitioning and comfort. Then I could die at peace, right? I want to see all this play out. It's horrific to think about, what's going to happen if we don't have any of this set up. So waiting for a crisis is not my strategy. and I hope that it's not a strategy for others, but I'm just sharing those stories because unfortunately, I think that has become a strategy for some families. So we need to come together as a very large, deserving community and continue to try and figure some of this stuff out, right? I'm a little long-winded on this story, but
that's fine. First of all, I second what you've just said. I talk to a lot of families, and the majority, and I will have to say the vast majority, are special needs single moms.
Yep.
And I hear several phrases a lot. One of them being, I need to breathe one more breath than my child. I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And it just like you, it breaks my heart when someone has that drive to say nobody else out there is going to do it the way I do it, so therefore I have to be on this earth longer than my child. And that is not a realistic approach. All right. So we need to, like you said, we need to plan for that. Some of the things that single families don't take into consideration as well is there might be a day, and there probably will come a day, when even though I am here, I'm physically capable of speaking to and talking to my child, but physically I am unable to provide the care that they need. Yep. My body has given out, right? Absolutely. And that happens a lot. right? And their child is still 20 to 30 years younger than them, and their body is still going just fine, right? So that's another thing to take into consideration. But when I work with families, I would say that at least 85% of the families I work with are single parent families. And of that dynamic, 99% of that dynamic is single moms.
Yep. So
So
Dennis, if I can,
because
I want to interrupt for a second. So this is a perfect segue, as I shared with the audience on the top end of this, right? I mean, I want to hear what you're seeing. I think I'm seeing similar, but I want to hear your thoughts on this, especially single mom thing, and what you're thinking about, and what can be done, or what can be done to help improve their lives. So tell us what you're thinking about, and what are you working on?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that we can do. First of all, every family can do planning. Every family. There are zero cost tasks that can be done, and one of those is what's called the letter of intent. The letter of intent can be created so that the next generation caregiver, no matter who that is, will have documentation of how best to care for your loved one, right? And at this point, I talk to a lot of families that say, well, even if I did have the letter of intent, I can tell people how to care for my loved one, my child, but they would never be able to do it as good as me. And I'm like, well, I understand that. So instead of just writing it down, let's take some videos, right? And let's show them how best to care for your child rather than just tell them. Because honestly, you can tell me, you can tell me that this step needs to follow this step, needs to follow that step, needs to follow that step, and I'm going to interpret it in my brain how to do it. But if you show me how to do it, if you put a video camera on it and say, this is how my child best responds to these types of care, then we have that extra visual perspective of things. So when I help families put together a letter of intent, I also encourage them to do photos and videos, just because it's free, right? Our smartphones can do that, and we can attach these videos to the letter of intent. So every family can do some level of special needs planning. But what I find is that a lot of moms, special needs moms were in the single family or single parent families, you run into a lot of different problems. First of all, no longer are you dealing with a two-income family, right? So the second income is out the window. Secondly, that pay gap still exists, right? And the mom is likely going to have a job that pays less, even if they had that same role, they would possibly get paid less. So we need to take those kinds of things into consideration with our planning, and I do, right? I try to find ways to help moms accomplish goals the right way. But what I also really found out is that really I can help the single moms as much as I can, but I have a passion, and I think this is where we were going with this. I have a passion to keep the dads involved, right? And I'm working on a book right now that basically is special. This is just a working title, Special Needs Planning, Dads, We Need You. Right. And with that, I'm going to give dads, whether they are two parent families, divorced families where the dad is still involved, or even a single parent dad. I'm working on scenarios in the book for all the different ways to keep dads involved in the planning for their children. There is so much that they can do, and there's just so much that love needs to propagate right? And we need to propagate that love through whatever means we can do as a dad, right? I just think that's extremely important. So yeah, I am working on a book trying to give single moms at least a resource to say, oh, I didn't even think about involving the father with this type of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Or having the father say, "Oh, you know what? I could easily do that. I thought it was going to be so much harder for me to do these things. If I could do that and still be involved with my child's future, I can take on that part of it." Right. So I'm working on a book that is hopefully going to maybe not solve world's problems, but at least give some options for people to keep those dads involved and make the lives of our loved ones just that much better.
Dennis, that's incredible. I think it's so important, number one. Number two, yeah, I realize this is that's a big whatever the right word is, that's a big tall mountain to climb here, because yeah, I mean, in a lot of cases I see the dads just totally dropped out of their lives. And but I would hope there's some dads out there that have done that are regretting their decisions to totally disengage or whatever, and can come back into the picture. But just the fact that you are putting something together that gives some real workable tasks of sorts, or things they can do to step back in and contribute to the well-being and care of their child. I think I love your project. I cannot wait to see that all come together, and it will benefit many. I'm certain of that. So thank
Well,
you.
thanks. What gives me hope is that on this podcast are two special needs dads.
Yeah. Hey,
You know,
it's a
so
start.
I think that in itself gives me hope.
Absolutely. And and in all fairness to the dads, I could get a little rough sometimes, but I will say, in fairness to the dads, just like yourself, I'm sure I know so many incredible men out there, fathers, husbands that are in the same situation you and I and our families are in, that just are phenomenal. They have stepped to the plate and then some, right? And in the care of their son or daughter. So I admire them all deeply, and I admire them. It's just incredible. Yeah, for the ones that are, and I'll use the word deadbeat firmly, is for the ones that are deadbeats. Yeah, I'd love to see them step back into the picture here some way, somehow. These moms need help, as you said, on some of these blogs. I mean, that I follow on Facebook, and I know you follow some of the same ones outside of the one that you manage. There's just so many stories out there that a mom will jump in. She's all alone. She's all alone. Her not only has her husband left her years ago, but her core family, right? The nuclear family have kind of pulled away, and just don't. There's no safety net for this mom, and they're at wit's end, and it's sad to see. So I think what you just described is not only going to be helpful for some of the dads that realize that may have stepped out of the picture, that they could step back in and help contribute, but maybe some of the other extended family members, right? That have kind of exited their daughter's life, so to speak. So I love it. Do you have a timing on this? What's your goal? I don't want to put some pressure and put you on the spot, but What could we anticipate?
Well, I'll say, yeah, I'm still in the early phases of it. I'm doing a lot of research, and I do have a partner that I'm working with, but at the same time, I would say it's still in the early phases.
Okay, no, fair enough. I love it, but I'm looking forward to it. And then before we close here, boy, you just brought up something 5-10 minutes ago in this conversation that just hit me as, wow, I didn't even think of that. You're talking about the letter of intent, which you and I have discussed before, and the value of it. And I've got to get moving on ours, frankly. And my wife Ruth and I talk about that all the time. But I never even thought, as simple as that. I never even thought of pictures and videos, Dennis. I so you gave me a big takeaway here, and I'm gonna do it, because we all like to think, and it's true, our kids are all very unique. So for me to video Kevin in one of his, interesting moments, right? Just put it that way, and trying to deal with it. A picture says 1,000 words, right? And a
Yep.
video.
Yeah,
So
it's really difficult for the human brain to really just take in words and put it all together.
Yep.
You put words and you put the visual together, and as many senses as you can bring in. But I think visual and textual are probably the two biggest ones that we can bring in. Now all of a sudden the level of understanding of how to care for your loved one just it goes up exponentially.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, thank you for that takeaway. It's something I'm going to implement in my planning here going forward. So Dennis, first off, thank you again. I really appreciate all the work you're doing to help this well-deserving community, this community of ours, a special needs community all over this country, all over the world, frankly. But let's talk about the U.S. right for the moment.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge, and as you said, the numbers are growing. So these challenges, these problems aren't going away. They're only going to become larger challenges, and we need smart, passionate people, and it takes a village, right? I mean, we've all got something to contribute that will help benefit others. So thank you for all you're doing, and by all means, if you've got any closing comments here, go for it.
Well, yeah, if those one on the webcast here, if they want to just visit my Facebook group again, it's How Special Needs Planning Works, and let me know what you think. I would love to hear comments and get some feedback. But that is also a work in progress. There's a lot more that I'm planning on doing with the How Special Needs Planning Works site. I just really do have a passion to help families take care of their loved ones, not only in this, in our lifetimes, but through theirs. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and by the way, I'll certainly share when I go through the YouTube podcast prep here. I'll be sure to have a frame with your direct contact info if that's okay. So, and mention certainly of your Facebook group. So, all right. Well, Dennis, I have a feeling you and I are going to be talking again soon, either offline or on another podcast. And thank you again for everything. And audience, I hope you thought that this conversation was worthwhile. And we got to keep pushing forward on this housing topic. All right. Thank you, everyone. God bless. And we'll be back at you soon. Take care.